What is up, guys, and welcome to Soundsphere magazine and Gimme. My name is Aiden. I've just had the pleasure of talking to Alex McCarthy, one of Britain's biggest wrestling journalists currently. He spoke about how he got into journalism, some dream matches he has, the reason why he actually started watching wrestling, and much more. I hope you enjoy, and yeah. Hi, Alex. So just tell me how you got into journalism in the first place.
Covering football, probably. That was more of what I thought I was going to do. And it didn't. It was fine. Like I graduated and stuff and had a 2-1 and all that good stuff. But I just didn't do any work experience while I was there or really put myself to use at all. I was just having fun, really. I didn't really grasp how important work experience is in the journalism industry. And it really is. So I kind of had 4 years after uni where I was just doing regular work like sales, cold calling, customer service, like stuff that I just detested. And then it got to the point where I was like, I can't do this. And my mum, who is she's like a head of like a college head, not head teacher, but she like runs a college basically. And she was like, the college I'm working at right now has a NCTJ class, which is essentially what you need if you want to work for a newspaper as a journalist. She was like, why don't you go back there, do that, get some experience? So I was like, okay, cool. And I went and did that. And then I got experience at like a local paper, 442 magazine. And then, and then the doors started to open. So it was a bit of a journey. That was about 2015, I think I did that. And then by the time the first kind of roles I got, I worked in like sports betting for a little bit, but then Gimme Sport came along. They had a deal with the NBA, and I became their like staff writer for the NBA. But then it just kind of mutated from there, where I was doing US sports, and I always said to them, "Well, I like wrestling, and I knew we wrote about wrestling, so I was like, if you ever need someone to do that," and I always think they were just a bit like, whatever, just do what you're going to do, mate. And it wasn't until, like, I don't know, 18 months after that an opportunity came around to interview Sheamus. And I don't think they really had anyone to do it. It was kind of a partnership with 2K. And they were like, do you want to do it? And I was like, obviously I want to do it. And then I just kind of started doing it from there. And it's kind of snowballed ever since. Like, from there, I grew to be like the US editor at Gimme Sport. And then I became just a WWE editor. I go now and said, hey, like, you want to come do for us what you're doing for Gimme Sport? And I was like, yeah, obviously, like, more money is bigger station. I spent a year there, and we turned, I think it was like 30,000 clicks in the whole year for WWE to like 13 million. And then they were like, well, wow, maybe we should get a radio show as well. So it's just literally snowballed and snowballed. The way my career's gone is there's not like, it wasn't like a set path is what I'm trying to say. Like, there isn't no, oh, I'll be a wrestling journalist like this. It just kind of happened. But yeah, it's not a conventional journey. If I would give anyone advice, I would say obviously try and get all the experience you can early on and utilize those assets the best you can if you study it, without doubt.
And so obviously you were talking about when you were younger, you've always liked wrestling. Just kind of tell us your first wrestling memory growing up.
So my first actual wrestling memory is probably, and this is really showing my age, but when I was a kid, you didn't have Sky or Virgin. It was like just a black cable box, and it was. I remember Sky Sports was like channel 15. There was only like 40 channels. I think TNT was like 26, something like that. And so I would like flirt between the two on a Friday night. Because that's when we would get it here in the UK. You'd get Raw and Nitro on a Friday, and I'd kind of flip between the two. But I just remember watching The Rock. I just remember catching him and thinking, like, I was so captivated by him. Like, it's hard to like kind of put my finger on it because I obviously knew nothing about wrestling. All I knew is that he was like wildly entertaining. I thought he was like so cool, and I was only like, I don't know, 10, 11 years old. So I had that, and I remember kind of seeing the NWO and stuff like that on Nitro, and I remember the Montreal Screwjob. Like, I really didn't understand what it was. I was just like, this is weird. Like, where's Bret Hart gone? So they're like my first memories, and it's kind of, I miss it. I miss being a fan who didn't know any better. And obviously back then as well, the internet wasn't so prevalent, so you couldn't read up on what's going on or the dirt sheets or any of that stuff. So it was a great time to be a wrestling fan, man.
And so like moving back to the story, you touched on it before about how you came into wrestling journalism. So it was just an interview initially with Sheamus, and then obviously you moved to bigger and better things now. And obviously now, like you're talking to big people. You talked to Keith Lee last week, the week before. Talked to numerous stars from multiple promotions. Just talk to us how you go about getting these interviews, because a lot of people obviously don't fully understand how much effort actually has to go into getting interviews with certain stars, I suppose.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of different ways. Like I said, those first interviews were kind of through 2K, who obviously had the partnership being WWE's game distributor. I spoke to the Young Bucks every week because they're promoting their autobiographies at the moment. And a lot of it comes down to building up a pedigree, building up a history of your work that causes the PRs to want to come back and work with you more. And of course, on top of that, you've got to have a platform. And TalkSport is a major, major platform in the UK. So people want to work with you. A lot of it is to do with building a body of work and having a platform that people want to associate with. And, for me, obviously, all of that has been a process from working with Sheamus, and then you impress people a little bit there. And I had Big Show shortly after. There was a lot of different things where, I've gone to events as well. Like I've been a very active kind of journalist. I go to like NXT UK shows, Progress, been to WrestleMania, been to SummerSlam. You get to know the PRs, you get to know the companies, and they want to work with you. And so it's a lot of putting in the yards. I would say hard yards, but to me it's not hard because obviously I love going to wrestling shows. But it's a lot of putting yourself out there, being active, always being willing, and I consider myself one of the hardest working people. It's a combination of all those things that kind of get you the opportunities. But without a doubt, like now I'm at the point where, like, I had Styles this week, and I reached out to WWE and I was like, it'd be really cool if I could do this, and I kind of pitched what I wanted to do, and then it came to fruition. But I like to think it's been years. It's been like 4 years or so of putting that work in and proving myself as an interviewer and a journalist to get to the point where we are now. So it doesn't just happen. You don't just meet someone and go, oh, here's all the interviews I ever wanted. Unfortunately, it doesn't really work that way. But if you're prepared to put the time in and you can produce the goods, then it will happen.
And just talking about, like you said, you were going into journalism and you're saying work experience is one of the biggest things. If someone is aspiring to be a wrestling journalist, what sort of tips could you give them to kind of get to the level where they will be on par, I suppose, with you or other people that are in big kind of networks that get interviews with wrestlers?
Well, I would obviously look at the platforms you want to work with and work towards that. You get a ton of people who do podcasts and stuff these days, but I did a great grounding with Gimme Sport. They have an academy there, and obviously opportunities to write about wrestling and stuff. So that's a good place to kind of get yourself established. You look at Inside the Ropes, somewhere like that. I'd be looking to, especially their new website, reach out to them. I want people, I was planning on having a batch of people come and work under me this year as work experience. From my old university, I was going to have them in. I was going to do 2 of those this year. I was going to have 2 lots of 8 come and work with me. Obviously, coronavirus has put that to rest, but I do plan to pick that up because it's important to me to, for want of a better term, pay it forward. I didn't have anyone before me really in the UK. Of course, in America there's lots of established journalists, but I mean in the UK there's not many wrestling journalists, so it wasn't like I could reach out to someone and say, how do I do this or how do I do that? It was just my journey finding it as I went. I didn't even know what I was looking for most of it, but it happened. And so I'm keen to kind of open the doors if I can to other people that are interested in it, and it seems like there are, like in this day and age, a lot of people that are interested in writing and talking about wrestling.
Yeah, I think that's the case. I think nowadays a lot of people, I suppose wrestling's one of them people that you've got those who say it's not a sport, it's not a real sport, and then you've got those who argue that it is, and me personally think it is. So I suppose, you've got a vast amount of people who probably are not scared, but are thinking to themselves, well, maybe I don't want to push myself too much into this. I'll focus on football and and other sports, and kind of put that to the back of the mind and write about wrestling kind of on the side. So talking about your kind of work that you've done, who's been your most interesting interview to date? Because you have interviewed quite a lot of big names with, I suppose, a lot of different stories.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of different guys and girls that I've interviewed that I've relished or been really proud of, because not only just the people that you're talking to, but the content of that interview. You know, if you get some really great stuff. The AJ interview I did this week is honestly one of my favourites, certainly from this year. He was really opened up, so it was great. I normally say this, but the Triple H interview I did ahead of Takeover Cardiff for NXT UK, I think that still is my favourite to date, just because that was where a lot of people got to know me for the first time. And it was like a big opportunity, sort of 25 minutes sitting down with Triple H. Not many people get that. And it just felt like, you know, it just felt it went as well as it could have done. Like, I felt like I delivered. I did good questions. He gave me great answers. They all did great traction. And that's really what you're after, right? You want people to read what you're doing and watch. So it was, for me, that was definitely a career highlight anyway, no matter how it went. But I'm just so pleased that we knocked it out of the park. And yeah, that I would say Triple H, but I've had a ton of amazing ones, like Drew McIntyre on the way to WrestleMania last year was, I mean, I speak to Drew a lot anyway, but that one in particular where he opened up about Brock Lesnar was really great. I remember speaking to Paige, who ran me through the night that obviously her career ended, because there was obviously a lot of people who kind of blamed Sasha for that, but Paige really opened up to me about how it wasn't Sasha's fault and what happened backstage. You know, really cool stuff that other people hadn't got before, but I was able to get, and that's kind of like what you pride yourself on, right? Like, your interviews, to me, it's all about asking the right questions and setting the right tone, being someone that they can talk to. You know, it's one thing to ask the right question, but how do you ask it and when do you ask it? There's a lot of different nuances that I don't think is always appreciated. Well, I mean, it's appreciated, but it's a hard skill. So I've definitely got better with that as the years have gone on. And, you know, if I come away from an interview unfulfilled, it's normally because I feel like, oh man, I could have done that better. Do you know what I mean? It's something that you learn through time.
And so, obviously, with the big names that you spoke to, I'm looking to kind of future kind of interviews for you. Who is your, I suppose, dream interview? I know you've interviewed big guys like Triple H, etc. But if you could have a dream person, I mean, even dead or alive, if we do one dead, one alive, who would it be?
The Rock is like my number one, because he's like the whole reason I fell in love with wrestling. I mean, but at the same time, Vince McMahon would be like, it wouldn't happen, but still, if you could sit down with that man for any extended period of time, I'd have so many goddamn questions for that man. I think The Rock is number one, just because he's meant so much to my career. You know, sometimes I think it's crazy. You probably, you know, don't really think about it, but just my fandom of him has kind of led my life to where it is now, like through a series of choices and, you know, whatever. The core of it stems from my love of watching him as a kid. Dead. Wow. Good question. I mean, the first guys that kind of runs to my mind a lot, I don't know, Yokozuna and Andre the Giant and people like that. Owen Hart, probably, or Eddie Guerrero. Oh, man, there's a lot. I mean, Chris Benoit, I'd like to ask him what the fuck was going on there. Like, I mean, you know what I mean? Like, there's a lot.
Yeah.
I hadn't even really thought about it till just now, but there's a lot of guys that, you know, for very different reasons, as I've just discussed with the names there, of who I could talk to. But I think, you know, dead or alive, The Rock is the guy.
Yeah, it's great, I suppose, example of someone who, because you could talk to him, it's not just about, you know, wrestling, you could talk to him about films he's doing and I suppose just general life. Like, obviously, you're both dads, so you could talk about that. I think he'd just be a great guy. Can you imagine just sitting down with a pint?
His birthday, he's on the same day as my oldest daughter's as well, which is weird serendipity right there. But yeah, there you go.
And so just moving, I suppose you've answered this with The Rock, but is there anyone else who kind of stood out to you when you were younger as, like, I suppose, your favourite wrestler?
Yeah, I mean Austin, right? Like who couldn't love Steve Austin at that time? He was just red hot, and that's the thing. That's what made the era so magical, was that The Rock had Austin and Austin had Rock, and that was kind of like something that defined the ages. So I think definitely, I kind of feel guilty for saying it, but like as I've got older, and especially looking back, like I loved the way Chris Benoit worked. Such a shame, but terrible how that obviously all ended. But in terms of an in-ring worker, I always enjoyed Chris Benoit, Shawn Michaels. Like that was another one. You know, being able to meet and interview him at times has been a bit like, whoa, like Shawn Michaels. Like he is another one. I think I would argue he's probably the greatest in-ring performer there's ever been. I was a big Kane guy as a kid. Liked Kane, you know, like original Master Kane. I dug very much. So yeah, I mean, there was tons of guys. You know, WWE's roster at that point was just insane. Like, you know, I think in 2000, your mid-carders like Kurt Angle, Chris Jericho, and Benoit, which is just ridiculous. So there's all those guys I mentioned, Angle included. Yeah, I'm a huge fan of their work. Now that I've said Kurt Angle, I'm hard pressed to think of anyone I've enjoyed watching more, like bell to bell. In his prime, he was ridiculous, like from sort of 2001, and then obviously he was injured a fair bit, and he had the wrestling machine gimmick. He was just insane. So there's just a lot of guys who have influenced me in different ways down the years, because you grow to like different things, but ultimately the package of what you enjoy in a wrestler, be it the personality, charisma, being ring work, spots, the memorable moments and spots, all of it comes together, and like those names that I mentioned kind of have all of that in terms of the package.
And so obviously we're looking at the kind of modern day wrestling that's here today, and we've got numerous brands, I suppose, and promotions competing with each other. Which brand to you would you say is putting out the best content at the moment?
I think Dynamite is the best show. I do think Smackdown is great right now. And I think that's because they are propped up by obviously Roman Reigns and Sasha Banks. So if you have those two as your focal point, you're going to struggle to not have a great show. And they're obviously hot at the moment. I do think that those two have made SmackDown exponentially better. And obviously to build a show around those two makes things a lot easier. Even Sami Zayn is a great cornerstone of that show. And you've got Big E and other people like that. So I do think SmackDown got it going on. But generally speaking, I just think Dynamite have... You can tell there's direction for everything. There's several stories woven into the show. It's an exciting show. It feels like it has a tempo and an intensity that WWE has lacked for many years, especially and it's not so much that, you know, they're not overtly more violent or sexual or anything else other than WWE, right? There's not that many differences apart from maybe AEW will say bullshit on air. Like, that's not a grave difference. It just comes in the content of the stories that they tell and the programs that they write. And Tony Khan keeps that tight, whereas WWE has a gajillion writers, and then they have to get to Vince, and there's a detachment there. So I feel like AEW are more in tune with their talent and today's landscape, and that has really helped them put together a great show this year. I would say my order would be Dynamite, SmackDown, just below kind of NXT, and then Raw. Like, that's how I look at it this year.
Yeah, I'd probably agree with you. I think the content that I'm really huge on the stuff that NXT are doing. I think Balor going back was just massive for them, and it kind of sets them in a different level. Cross is obviously back, but yeah, Dynamite to me, it's just been putting out some insane, like just not just matches, just general kind of promos and stuff like that. Just on another level in time.
And that's the thing. 18 months ago, I'd have said, like, NXT untouchable. And I've said this on Twitter before. Like, you look at the roster they had 18 months ago, like the show they had in April, unbelievable. They had like Ricochet, Prime Velveteen Dream, Riddle, Aleister Black, War Raiders, Kairi Sane, Shayna Baszler, like Bianca Belair, on top of like a lot of what they got now, like Keith Lee, or Keith Lee's on the main roster now. But Ciampa Gargano was obviously at his apex with its story, and they had an unbelievable roster and they were killing it. But the nature of NXT means they have to turn over their talent because they go up to the main roster and stuff, and they're always going to be losing that battle to Dynamite because they can't just like build their roster. they have to just hold it. It's just a cycle, which unfortunately will always work against them. But I've said this a million times, and I'll say it again. I still think NXT TakeOver is the best show in wrestling.
And so, moving to kind of dream matches that you potentially have. If you could book a dream match now, I mean, cross brand, anything like that, cross promotions, cross brand in WWE, what would be the ones, I suppose, maybe a male match and a female match that you would, if you could, book?
Let's see. I mean, I still think Rock and Reigns is one of the biggest matches you could possibly book in terms of mainstream appeal and heritage and all that great stuff. So there's probably that. In terms of women, I mean, Stardom's amazing, right? But like for the most part, WWE has all of the best women wrestlers in the world. NXT division is ridiculous. You got SmackDown, obviously, with Banks and Bayley, and Charlotte will be back to Raw at some stage. Like, there's a ton of great stuff that you can do there. Becky Lynch will return one day, so I don't really see any other. There's no women in AEW. There's Britt Baker and Sheeta are cool, but I don't see them as like I don't like salivate for them to face one of the horsewomen or something. I think Becky Lynch and Ronda Rousey is probably still the biggest one-on-one drawing match that they could possibly make in WWE, with Sasha Banks and Bayley right up there with them too, like on a WrestleMania stage. If we're talking cross promotion, though, I don't know. I'd like to see like Cody Rhodes versus like a Triple H, just for the story laid in there, or like a Kenny Omega, Roman Reigns, or Seth Rollins. Like, there's a lot of cool ones there, and the same goes for like Japan. If you want to get like Okada and Tanahashi and Ibushi, or all of those guys, you can make any great matchup basically. But yeah, again, as well, I'd like to see CM Punk come and face some guys in AEW. That'd be cool as well. So there's still a lot of dream possibilities in wrestling, which is, the imagination needs. But I do think that WWE are aiming for Reigns and Rock at some point. It's not sure when now. I think it would have been this year, but obviously with everything that's gone on, it's not going to happen for a while yet. Probably WrestleMania 38, I would have thought.
And moving on to, I suppose, the biggest draws in the company at the moment. I know you mentioned Roman Reigns earlier. He's massive to Smackdown. Who do you think kind of the biggest draw is at the moment, I suppose, for all brands? Because there is a lot of people that people will just the audience will just tune in for, say, Roman Reigns' heel turn and how that's going. I suppose Raw at the moment is one of them where you could argue, apart from Drew, who else is there that's the biggest draw? I know the Fiend's up there, who's really interested.
Yeah, I mean, I thought Randy was doing well earlier this year. Like when he was really red hot as a heel, people were very interested in what he was doing. I also think that to me that the top two draws in the company right now are Sasha Banks and Roman Reigns, and there's numbers to back up that claim, especially on Banks' side. She's had the highest rated segments in WWE since the pandemic started. And she had the highest segment in NXT with her match with Io Shirai. So wherever she goes, people follow. And, she has a vocal fan base on Twitter. So, like, to me, like, them two are the biggest draws, and the fact that SmackDown has them reflects that in the numbers, because obviously they're probably doing about 1 million more strong than Raw is at the moment. Like Randy was hot earlier this year, but otherwise I don't think Raw have got much going on at the moment. I do think Drew McIntyre's had a tremendous year in terms of growth and stuff like that, but I just don't. Is he a box office smash right now? No, probably not, and I don't think he would say he is either. So, but that's the whole point, right? You develop these stars because that's where you want to get to, where people want to pay a lot of money to see Drew face different people, and that will happen. Drew's only going to get bigger from here, but it's still a building process. And I still think that is something that's under construction, as it were. Because all things considered, WWE will look at someone like Brock Lesnar and say he's still their biggest draw, although he's not officially signed with them at the moment. But I think we all know that he is. And when it comes to WrestleMania season, that it will be factored in as such. But they have done a good job of building Drew this year, and hopefully he is on his way to that. But I still think if you look at Smackdown, and they've got Rollins, Reigns, and Banks. It's hard to argue that they haven't got like the stacked deck over there.
Do you have any big ideas coming up for TalkSport and yourself?
To map out exactly what I want to do is very difficult. Obviously, a lot of my interviews at the moment have been Zoom related. The other week, we had a show that had The Undertaker, Paul Heyman, the Young Bucks, and Ken Shamrock on one show, which is like, to me, is unbelievable. Like when I actually wrote that down, I was like, wow. Like, a few years ago, if someone had told me that, I would never have believed it. Even one of them, let alone all four. So it's, to me, like you talk about big ideas. I see Talk Wrestling, which is my radio show, being a brand of its own in the future. I'd very much like that. I run the wrestling part of the TalkSport website. I'd very much like Talk Wrestling to be something, take on a life of its own in connection with TalkSport. And then I could hire guys to come work for me and get writers in and hopefully expand that and make it a bit of a hotbed for the best writers in the UK. That is what I would like. There's just so much stuff that we haven't done at TalkSport yet in terms of, at the moment my interviews go on Inside the Ropes YouTube channel. That should really be on TalkSport. But, they don't want to utilise wrestling because, you said at the beginning of the interview, what is a sport and what isn't. So they're kind of afraid sometimes, I think, to upset sports fans. And I get that because it happens. I've worked at other companies and I've seen the backlash you get. So it's not that I'm upset with it. I understand it. But I do think if you make Talk Wrestling a brand and people know what they're coming for and you own it, that's different. And people would be receptive. Wrestling fans would know that it was for them. So I do think there is a lot to do there. The radio show that I have at the moment, people can get it on catch up, but it's not actually podcasting. That's another thing that I want to change. So there's a lot of room for growth with Talk Wrestling. That's kind of my focus, is making sure that grows to be as big as it can be. And I think if it does, then it will reverberate around the UK media scene and hopefully presents more opportunities. That is my goal. And I do think it's possible.
It's been a joy to speak to you, mate, and good luck with everything in the future. I suppose we've got a lot of wrestling to look forward to, whether it be AEW, NXT, whatever it is. Some big pay-per-views coming up. But thanks again. Wish you all the best, and hopefully we'll talk again soon.